having true faith. It's fundamental, it is basic to knowing God and being in relationship with God. We can't arrive at God by pure reason alone, although there are good rational arguments for the existence of God. We have to believe that He exists with faith.
Welcome to Encounter the Truth with Jonathan Griffiths. Today we begin a message called True Faith, where we're taking a look at Hebrews chapter 11. And Jonathan, you point out the fact that when we come into a saving relationship with Jesus, it has to be true faith. What do you mean by that? It's not just enough to believe that Jesus exists?
It's very interesting to see the way in which Hebrews defines faith in the passage we're going to be looking at today. The writer does give us this intriguing definition. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things unseen. And as we stand back and we reflect upon that, we have to conclude that God could have organized things in a different kind of way. He could have given us the kind of empirical proof, scientific proof, whatever you want, that would have made it impossible for us to deny His existence or to walk away from Him. He hasn't organized things in that way, but He has called us to respond to His revelation in creation and in the person of His Son and in the Scriptures. He's called us to respond to that with trust and belief. And clearly doing that is something that honors Him and delights Him. And that's what we are called to. We are called to that kind of trust in His revelation. And that's the very essence of faith.
Well, we're going to continue to look at this today from the book of Hebrews. If you don't have a Bible handy, hope you'll grab one and join us in chapter 11 as we begin a message called True Faith. Here is Jonathan.
Well, we are living, aren't we, in extraordinary days. I think the coronavirus pandemic has already shown it to be the crisis of our generation, perhaps with the exception of the generation who lived through the Second World War. And remember that few of us within our church family will have seen such widespread disruption to daily life on such a global scale. What the actual outcome of all this will be, it is as yet unknown, but the disruption to normal life, the fear, the widespread panic, these things we know are all too real. And so as followers of Jesus Christ, we are confronted all too urgently with the question of how to respond. How do we respond to these things Christianly? How shall we navigate these days as authentic followers of Jesus Christ? What will it look like for us simply to live through this as Christian people in such unprecedented times? One of the things that we've been talking about quite a lot in recent days in our own home is the fact that God is sovereign. We've been talking about the sovereignty of God. Although this is a surprise to all of us, these events are no surprise to Him. And I was reflecting on that simple but profound truth when I considered our sermon series and where we land today. When I considered the fact that this sermon series, planned some time ago, brings us this morning, as planned, to the Bible's definitive discussion of faith. We find ourselves landing on Hebrews chapter 11 in this time of crisis. I didn't plan that knowingly, of course, I couldn't have. But I think, if I were to cast about in the Scriptures for a passage on which to preach on this particular week and in this particular season, Hebrews chapter 11 would, I think, be my top pick. If there is one thing that must define us in these troubled times, it must simply be this. It must be faith. In a hopeless and a panicking world, Christian believers are going to stand out as those who have faith and live by faith. That's who we are. That's who we must be in these troubled times. But as we say that, here is the question then for us to consider. What is faith? What is true faith? What is authentic faith? And what does it look like in practice to live out that faith even in unsettled times like our times now? Well, Hebrews raises that question for us, and it puts the issue on the front burner in chapter 11. It actually came to the fore a little bit at the end of our passage last week. That's why I read from the end of chapter 10. The writer's calling us to endurance in our walk with Christ, verse 36. He's exhorting us to keep going, trusting in Jesus. Don't give up, he says. And he gives us his basis for that call in verse 37, some powerful words that he quotes from the Old Testament book of Habakkuk and chapter 2. Yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay. But my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. Words spoken to people in a different kind of distress, in a different age, in the age of Habakkuk, but we won't go there now. The righteous people of God, the saved people of God, the people made righteous through the blood of Christ, the righteous people of God are by definition a people of faith. We are a people who will live by faith. Well, those who don't have saving faith, they will face the displeasure of God, even the judgment of God, Hebrews tells us. But the believing, the faith-filled people of God, they're going to know God's salvation. And the writer, he's confident. He's confident that the people he's writing to, the church he's addressing, he's confident that they are such a people. Verse 39. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. Well, like them in their day, we must today be a people of faith, a people who persevere in faith, a people who will live by faith day by day, even in times of difficulty, even in times of uncertainty, especially in such times. But what is that faith? What will it look like in practical terms to live in that way? Well, here in these verses, Hebrews gives us a definition of true faith, authentic faith. And then having given us a definition, he goes on to give us a number of powerful examples, powerful models of the life of faith. We begin with the definition of faith, verse 1. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things unseen. I think we're a people who appreciate proof, who value evidence, who like to see things with our eyes, touch things with our hands before we're going to take them very seriously at all. If you want me to buy a product from you, give me a sample, take me for a test drive, show me 1,000 verified reviews online, let me experience it, and give me the option of returning it if I don't like it. The end of free samples at Costco this week was a distressing sign for many people that things had got really serious. And we'll be glad, won't we, to see the free samples back. How many of us have bought products because we tasted them, because we tried them, because we experienced them? When it comes to science, we don't take it seriously until we can put it in a test tube and verify it. We don't believe it until we have read multiple peer-reviewed studies. We want proof. We want to see. We want to feel. We want to touch. That's how we operate. But you know, there is something about faith that will not be boiled down in that way. Faith, Hebrews tells us, is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. God, by his word, makes promises, and he makes commitments to us about things that we cannot see and we cannot touch and we cannot put in a test tube. The word of God gives us hope for the future, hope that God will welcome us to eternal dwellings, hope that our life with him in eternity will be full of joy and free of pain, where life and health and vitality will be our experience with him, and death and disease will be no more. And faith is having the assurance that God's word is true and his promises are valid. Faith is having the conviction that the things God tells us about in his word, things that we cannot see and feel and scientifically prove, Faith is the conviction that they are real and true and substantial. This is not an easy thing, faith. It's not something that comes very naturally to us. It's something that has actually always gone against the grain of the skepticism of the human nature. But faith has always been the required response of God's own people. The saints of old, verse 2, were commended for faith. Perhaps a textbook example of a faith issue, the belief that defines and gives shape to what faith truly is. Perhaps the supreme example is the example of verse 3. Faith that God made the world. Notice what the writer says. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. I find it very, very interesting that verse 3 is actually here. I find it very, very interesting that it's written down in this 2,000-year-old book. You see, I think we tend to view skepticism over creation as a very, very modern problem. You know, because we're so very clever now and so very scientifically advanced in our society, we now have begun to struggle with this issue in a way that the ancient people never would have struggled with it. For them, it was just natural to think that God made the world out of nothing by his word. They didn't think twice about it, we assume. But you know, they were primitive, we're advanced, we tell ourselves. Well, no, actually. As it turns out, Christian believers 2,000 years ago recognized that accepting God's creation of the world by his word, accepting that required faith. It's always required faith. You see, none of us was here at the very beginning to watch it happen. God chose not to take a video record of it for us to see. He chose instead, in his wisdom and in his sovereignty, to do it and then tell us about it, and then call us to believe his words. Now, I happen to believe that believing that God himself made the world and made us, I happen to think that the biblical doctrine is the most rational and coherent explanation for all that we see in this glorious world and all that we are in our complexity as human beings. And I think there are lots of good arguments to back up the biblical position. I think it actually takes a tremendous leap of faith and a tremendous suspension of disbelief to attribute all this, all that we see and all that we are, to some random process without any intelligent cause. That stretches credulity beyond any breaking point for me personally, and I know for many of you as well. There are powerful indications and strong arguments for believing that God made the world. But at the end of the day, to accept that God made this world by his word, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible, accepting that, here's what it takes. It takes faith. It just does. And God designed it that way. It's not that God couldn't manage to do better, couldn't prove this for us in some way that it would be impossible for us skeptical beings to deny. No, God chose to make this, at the end of the day, a matter of faith. You see, faith is something that pleases God. God fundamentally values faith. He wants to see faith in me, and he wants to see it in you. We human beings may long to eradicate the need for faith by putting everything in a test tube, but God delights in our willing and our trusting response to his word. Just notice what we read down in verse 6. And without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists, and that he rewards those who seek him. Faith. Having true faith, it's fundamental, it is basic to knowing God and being in relationship with God. We can't put God in a test tube. We can't arrive at God by pure reason alone, although there are good, rational arguments for the existence of God. We have to believe that he exists. We have to respond to his revelation to us with trust and belief, with faith.
This is Encounter the Truth with Jonathan Griffiths, and we have to pause the message right here, but hope you'll stay with us. We'll continue our message, True Faith, in just a moment. You know, if you want to get to know Jesus better, to really do a deep dive into his life, no better place to go than the four Gospels. And J.C. Ryle helps us do that by uncovering some of the hidden treasures that are revealed in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John's accounts of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. Now, he's written a lot on this, and his extensive commentary work is the basis for daily readings from all four Gospels. It's a devotional that presents 2 Gospel readings for each day, one in the morning, one in the evening, and these 732 readings, they're followed by some really insightful observation by Ryle, and then some wisdom-packed recommendations for application in your life, in your walk with Christ. We'd love to send you a copy of this devotional book from J.C. Ryle, called Daily Readings from All Four Gospels, as our way of saying thanks for your support. You can find out more or give online at encounterthetruth.org or call us at 833-99-TRUTH. And this is the last day to give your gift and request a copy of Daily Readings from All Four Gospels. Again, our website is encounterthetruth.org and our phone number is 833-99-TRUTH. All right, let's go back to the message. Once again, here is Jonathan.
Now, that's the substance of faith. That's the essence of faith, the definition of faith. It's the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things unseen. Well, having defined faith, the writer now moves to show us some key models of true faith, 3 models of faith from the book of Genesis: Abel, Enoch, and Noah. Models for us to learn from as we seek to live these lives of faith in our day. First model is Abel, and he models for us the kind of faith that gives its best. Verse 4. By faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts. And through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. I wonder if you've ever considered how your faith in God is reflected by what you give to God. It's a very interesting thought, isn't it? What we give to God in terms of our time and our energy, but perhaps most significantly, our money, our worldly goods. What we give to Him reflects our faith in Him, or indeed our lack of faith in Him. That's the great lesson that Abel teaches us. Abel was the second son of Adam, you may remember, and he and his brother Cain both brought gifts to the Lord. But by faith, Hebrews says, Abel brought a more acceptable sacrifice than his brother, and he left for us this testimony of faith that still speaks to us today. Now, to understand all the dynamics of this, we should turn back together to the original story, to the original incident. This is right back at the beginning of the Bible in the book of Genesis and chapter 4, way back. Let me read the account here from verse 1. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of the flock and their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. Now, what was it about Abel's offering that was pleasing to the Lord in a way that Cain's offering was not pleasing to the Lord? What is it that Abel models for us in the way of faith when it comes to this offering that he gave? Well, there isn't a great deal of detail here in the text of Genesis, but what there is here is very important. Cain, for his part, he brought an offering of the fruit of the ground. That's what we're told. He was a farmer. He had crops, and he duly brought something from his crops for the Lord. That sounds reasonable. It sounds fine. What's wrong with that? But then we hear about Abel. He was a farmer too. He raised sheep. Now, right here, there is something quite wonderful. I think we're actually given a beautiful little picture of the gospel. Abel couldn't possibly know this himself in his day, but we know, you and I know, that ultimately God will be satisfied when the perfect lamb is offered for sin, is sacrificed for sin. That's going to be the pleasing offering. That will be the offering that saves. When Jesus, the Lamb of God, gives his life for the sin of the world. That's a wonderful little gospel hint here in the story, a little pointer that draws our eyes to Christ. But that's not the only thing going on here in the story, in the account. There are some profound lessons from Abel and his model of faith. You see, when you compare Cain and Abel's gifts, you find that while Cain gave some of the fruit of his labor, Abel's attitude was of a different kind and a different order. He brought an offering of the firstborn of the flock and gave of the fat portions, we're told. While Cain gave something, Abel gave the first, and he gave the best. And in that action, in that simple action, we see something profound, I think, about the essence of faith. Think about Abel giving the firstborn. If you're a farmer and you raise livestock, the firstborn of your flock is your hope for the future. You don't know if there will be others born. Something bad could happen. You don't know what else will come, but you know that you've got your firstborn of the season. You've got the start of a new generation. You've got hope for feeding your family for the months to come, hope of another season beyond this one, hope of a future flock to come. In the ancient world, farmers didn't have Manulife or State Farm or Shepherd's Mutual or whatever. They didn't have insurance. They didn't have pensions either, no RRSPs. But here's what they did have. They had the firstborn of their flock as their security for the future. And Abel said to the Lord, "This is yours. I place my economic security in your hands. I entrust myself to you. I place my future in your hands, and I wait for your provision. I don't know if there will be others born this season, but the first is yours, Lord, and I'm trusting you for whatever may come." Added to that, Abel gave the fat portions of the flock to the Lord. He not only gave the first, he gave the best. He looked out over his flock and he took the very best of the sheep, the chubby ones, the ones that would make the best banquet at his table, the ones that would fetch the best price at market. And he said to the Lord, "These are yours. You have them." And if in giving the firstborn he was saying to the Lord, "I believe that you're trustworthy," in giving the best he was saying to the Lord, "I believe that you are of supreme worth. I can't see you with my eyes, but by faith I know that you are like this. You are the God who is worthy of the very best." And God looked on Abel's offering, and we're told he had regard for it. God commended Abel as a righteous man, Hebrews tells us. Not that Abel won salvation by a great act of generous giving, no. God saw in Abel's giving concrete evidence of true and living faith, saving faith, and that was pleasing to God. We want to be those who live lives of faith in our day, in these very uncertain days. That's the kind of life we need to live as God's people. That's what Hebrews is calling us to. And so I wonder, does our material response to God, does our generosity to his people and to his work, does it flow from faith, and does it give evidence of saving faith within our hearts?
Jonathan Griffiths wrapping up our message called True Faith, part of our series So Great a Salvation, as we're studying the book of Hebrews. And if you've missed any of the broadcasts in this series, I hope you'll come to the website. You can always listen online at encounterthetruth.org. And while you're there, I want to ask you to consider giving a gift of support. And as you do, we want to say thank you by sending you a book called Daily Readings from All Four Gospels. It's a devotional book from J.C. Ryle that will help you uncover some of the hidden treasures that are revealed in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And today's the final day to give your gift and request a copy of this devotional book. Again, it's called Daily Readings from All Four Gospels. To find out more or to give online, come to encounterthetruth.org or call us at 833-99-TRUTH. That's 833-998-7884 or or again, encounterthetruth.org. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time.